So the last example we're going to talk about today is going to be the consumer Java functional interface. And as before, we'll show this in the context of our Java collections framework. The consumer, as I mentioned before, is kind of the inverse of the supplier. Suppliers take no parameters, return a value. Consumers take a parameter and return no value. So you can kind of think of those things as being at the other end of the spectrum to connect everything together. The consumer is a generic interface that's parameterized by one reference type, and it has a single abstract method that's passed one parameter and returns nothing. As you can see here, we have the arrays as list method, which we had done before. And as we had done before, we're going to use our stooge threads example. So we're going to make ourselves a list of stooge threads. This is in the EX5 example in my Java repository in my GitHub account. What I'm going to focus on here is instead of doing sorting with functions, I'm going to go ahead and do printing of the results with the for each method. And the for each method, as we talked about before, there's a couple of different variants of for each. One works on collections, like in this case a list. One works on streams. This is the list version. So what we want to have happen is we want to have each thread printing its name out. That's what we want the behavior to be. So let's see how this is going to work. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have the for each method defined on iterable, and it's going to take a consumer action. And the consumer, as we can see, has a single method called accept that doesn't return a value, but takes a parameter in. And this parameter is really intended to have some kind of side effect, which is, of course, exactly what we're going to do here, as you'll see in a moment. So what we're going to do, as this example demonstrates, and this comes right out of the Java source code, is for each element that's in this iterable, in this list, in this case, we're going to go ahead and iterate through it using a for each loop. So for each element T of type T in this object, we're going to go ahead and accept the item and do something that the accept method dictates. So in this particular case, the consumer that we're going to have is system.out::println. And that's going to go ahead and print the results. No surprise, right? So basically what we're saying here is for each thread in our thread list, print the contents of the thread, or print its name, basically. And so what's going to happen here is this is going to bind the system.out::println method, which is what was passed here as the method reference. That's going to be replacing logically action.accept. So what's happening in essence is for each element in the list, for each thread in our list in this example, it's going to go ahead and print the thread, which will just print the name out. So that's an example of really cool, very concise, very simple example demonstrating how you can pass in the println method as a consumer to the for each method. Now, your upcoming assignment 1B is going to have you implementing the for each method in a variant of the unsynchronized array class. And so you'll have to kind of go back and look at this example. Your example will look quite a bit like this. And the thing to remember is in order for your example to work, you're going to have a functioning iterator. And so the way that this particular piece of code works when you do that for each loop is it assumes the iterator is implemented. So when you get to this part of your assignment and you're like, how the heck is it going to know to iterate through this thing? The answer is you have to have the iterator working properly in order for this to work correctly. So that's the end of the consumer functional interface. I think you'll agree it's very straightforward, very simple, and gets used to great effect. And we'll see this get used much later in the course when we talk about things like splitterators in Java and the Java Streams framework. There are ways of being able to take collections and split them up and turn them into streams. And you'll see that the consumer interface gets used very, very powerfully and very conveniently in that context.